Hello everybody, this is the grade 12 theory unit 2A. Today's topic is dominant seventh resolutions. These series of lessons I'll just be going through the theory guide, reading basically all of the instructions and content, and then all of the examples we'll be doing on the board here. So, what are dominant seventh resolutions? So all chords move from one chord to another to create a chord progression or a sense of harmonic movement. And with the classical dominant seventh, there is a very specific movement that is governed by a set of rules. This movement of from one chord to the next goes back a couple hundred years, and the series of rules and steps and methods of doing this was kind of established then, and we still use it today. It's found in a lot of music since then. These rules create a smooth transition from the dominant seventh chord to the tonic chord, and this movement between these chords is called a resolution because the dominant seventh resolves to the tonic or the home bass chord. So the rules of resolving dominant sevenths are as follows. The root will stay the same and it will become the fifth. The third moves down a step to become the root. The fifth moves down a step to become the root, and the seventh moves down a step to become the third. Sorry, the third goes up a step to become the root. So let's have a look at some of these. So I've got all of the examples that are on the first set, the major examples. And you can see with each of these different ones how the dominant seventh chord is being voiced differently. Again, quick recap, we're using capital Roman numerals because we are in a major key. And both of the chords that we're dealing with are always going to be major. The 7 refers to root position, basically dominant seventh. 6-5, this is first inversion. 4-3, second inversion. 4-2, third inversion. And remember, the inversion is defined by the note that's in the bass. So it's not. So the above notes we're going to see in just a moment. So long as the bass note is in the correct position, your upper voicings, you can have them in different places if you wish. So let's identify these different notes that we've got right here. So we know we're in root position with this triad. And remember, also a quick point to remember, we are writing dominant sevenths, not tonic sevenths. Okay, so this is sometimes something that happens. We're referring to the dominant or the fifth note of the scale of C major. And I think we can see without the absence of accidentals, and some of you looked ahead and determined, oh, we're actually resolving to C. No key signature. So we're going from like G to C basically. So G dominant seventh to C is the tonic. So the root note in this question is down here. It's the G. And so the notes that we need for a G dominant seventh are G, B, D, and F. And that's if everything again is just in stacked thirds, but those are the notes we're dealing with. So the next note we're going to go up and identify, this note is F. That's actually the seventh note. So again, the order has been manipulated. D, this is the fifth, and the third is here. So again, root, third, fifth, seventh. This is in root position. We've got, so these other voicings not as important so long as the bass note's in the correct location. So what are the rules that we need to do in order to resolve from this G dominant seventh to C? Well, the first one, let's deal with the root. The root stays the same and it becomes the fifth. Well, okay. Root not staying the same. There is an exception to the rule. The only time the rule doesn't apply is when you're dealing with the dominant seventh in root position. If the root stayed the same, then the tonic chord would be in the second inversion with the fifth in the bass voice, right? So we're going from G, now we're dealing with C, so the notes for this, and again, because we're going dominant seventh 4 notes and we're condensing it to just basically a tonic triad, we're only dealing with 3. So there's going to be a duplicate of one of the notes in our resolution. 2 C's, potentially 2 E's, or 2 G's perhaps. But we don't want to have the fifth. So again, we're resolving here, so C, E, G. G would be the fifth. Having the fifth in the bass doesn't give a really strong sense of closure or resolution to the sequence. So we try to avoid that. And what that means is the root is going to move up or down to the closest tonic, wherever it might be. And this creates a tonic chord without a fifth, which is acceptable. The fifth of a chord, if you remember back to early days, grade 9, we were talking about intervals, and we referred to them as either being consonant or dissonant, consonant being pleasant sounding, dissonant creating that harsh sense. but we also had the perfect intervals, and we describe those as sounding hollow, in terms like they're not, you can hear the notes, but they blend very well with one another. So well, in fact, that you can almost omit the fifth. Again, it's not a critical part of chords. Thirds, absolutely roots, yes, and any extensions, of course, are important. But we don't really have to worry about the fifth as much. So, the exception of this rule, that fifth is actually going to go up, and it's going to become a root of the resolved chord, in this case C. So the next rule, the third is going to go up a step, and it's going to become the root. So you can see here is the third. It has indeed gone up a step, and C is the root of this resolution of the triad here. So C is the root. The fifth is going to move down a step, and that's going to become the root. And again, another C. And then the seventh is going to go down a step, and it's going to become the third, which in this case is E. So now we're left with a C triad with three roots and a third. And that's totally fine. We've lost the fifth, but again, we did that in order to satisfy the strong sense of resolution. That's the only time you will have that exception, is when it's in root position. So let's have a look at the next example. So this is a dominant seventh in first inversion, which means, again, G, B, D, and F. That means we should have a B in the bass, and we do. So this is actually, in this case, we've got the third as the bass note. D is the fifth, is up here. Our seventh is here, and our root is here on the very top. So let's go through the sequence of rules. The root is going to stay the same and become the fifth. And it does. It stays on G, and it becomes the fifth, which is still G, but now it's the fifth of C major, or the C triad. The third is going to move up a step, and it's going to become the root. So here's the third B. It does go up to become a C, which is the root of that resolution. So now you can see we've got a C in the bass, it's going to have a strong sense of resolution. The fifth is going to go down a step, and that's going to become the root. Here we are, D. I know I've drawn them, but that is actually going down to become a root on middle C. And then the seventh is going to go down, and that's going to give us the third as well, which is the E. So again, this time we actually have two roots, a third and a fifth. So we have at least one of each of those pitches in there in this example. Second inversion, G, B, D, will be our bass note. So we've got the fifth in the bass. B, here's our third. Up here, G, that's our root. And here on the F is our seventh. So let's go through the steps again. Root stays the same, becomes the fifth. Third goes up a step, becomes the root. Fifth goes down a step, becomes the root. Seventh goes down a step, becomes the third. Again, two roots, a third and a fifth. Strong sense of resolution, we've got the C in the bass. And then the last example, third inversion. So now we've got the seventh in the bass, then we have third, fifth, and our root here. Let's go through the sequence again. The rules, root stays the same, becomes the fifth. Third is going to go up, and it's going to become the root. Fifth, going to go down and also become the root. In your guide, there's actually two middle C's. I've just combined the two just for simplicity. Really, it's the same on the guide as well. And the way that this was arranged, that's just the way it happens to come out. So even though you've gone to three, there's only three notes here. We still are duplicating the root in that case, so it's still there. And then the seventh is going to go down a step, and it's going to become the third. Now, we've got the resolution that's taken place. However, this we do need to make sure that we take into account. We need to do that every time as well. It's worked out so far. We've always had, up to this point, if you go back in these three prior examples, we always has the root in the bass. So we didn't have to actually indicate that there's been an inversion of any kind. However, in a third inversion dominant seventh, you do have to take into account that seventh, because it is in the root and it's going down, it's going to become the third of the tonic. In this case, the E. So we do have to indicate that we are in first inversion of C for that example. Okay? That's it. Minor triads, the exact same steps, the same rules apply, including the exception, including the inversion, first inversion going from third inversion dominant seventh, with the exception that you must remember, again, when we're dealing with minor triad or minor keys, we're dealing with the harmonic minor every time. That's very, very important. If we weren't using the harmonic minor scale, in your example in your guide, it's E minor with the F sharp. If we didn't put a D sharp for each of those examples, we wouldn't be able to do these resolutions because, again, we're using dominant sevenths. And if we just for a moment, okay, G, B, D, and F was our major. But if we had, a B flat, that would give us a minor third, and it would no longer become a dominant seventh. In the example in your guide, the dominant note of E minor is B, so we're dealing with, if we didn't raise that seventh of E minor, we'd have B, D natural, F sharp, A, but we need that D to be sharp, because again, if we think in terms of B major, major third above a B is actually a D sharp, which is the seventh note of E minor. So the D sharp has to be raised, or else we cannot do any of these questions. So when you're solving resolutions in a minor key, make sure whatever the seventh note is of that minor key, you automatically raise it by a semitone. If it's in the key of F minor, which I think that example is in your guide, make sure the seventh note, if it has to be a natural or a sharp, whatever needs to happen in order to make it raised relative to the key, make sure you're doing that. Otherwise, these won't work. When you're completing the assignment in your guide, I think those are the two keys. Yeah, so it's D major and it's F minor. And then it says, write and resolve enough dominant seventh chords until you feel confident with this skill, as many or as you would like on that. The nice thing about doing all of these AMU4M is that you can hear all of the resolutions taking place. And you'll very quickly be able to determine, like we were speaking with the minor keys, if you don't raise that seventh, you're going to get a minor third in the dominant seventh, and it's going to sound, you'll notice it right away, hopefully. So again, that's the added benefit of doing all of these examples in AMU4M, is that you can get the immediate feedback as you're working your way through these examples. When you're completing the guide work, I would also ask that you export your work as a PDF, and then that way I can mark it up in the hub. So that's it, everybody. Thanks for watching. And there is Unit 2A on dominant seventh resolutions.